everyone else.
Mad Max. Fury Road, 2015, a complete film analysis. Mad Max. Fury Road, 2015, a complete film analysis begins by acknowledging that upon its release in May 2015, this film was not merely another summer blockbuster, but rather a seismic event in the world of cinema. Directed by George Miller, the visionary creator who launched the original franchise back in 1979, this fourth installment arrived after a 30-year hiatus and immediately proceeded to shatter every expectation that critics and audiences had accumulated over the decades. Mad Max. Fury Road, 2015, a complete film analysis notes that it garnered near-universal acclaim, achieving a remarkable 97% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and an 89 on Metacritic, scores that placed it decisively among the greatest films of the entire 21st century. Critics and audiences alike hailed it not only as the finest action film in decades, but as a genuine masterpiece of visual storytelling. A work that proved big-budget action cinema could be both intellectually rigorous and emotionally resonant without sacrificing any of its spectacular entertainment value. Upon its release in May 2015, this film was not merely another summer blockbuster, but rather a seismic event in the world of cinema. Directed by George Miller, the visionary creator who launched the original franchise back in 1979, this fourth installment arrived after a 30-year hiatus and immediately proceeded to shatter every expectation that critics and audiences had accumulated over the decades. It garnered near-universal acclaim, achieving a remarkable 97% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and an 89 on Metacritic, scores that placed it decisively among the greatest films of the entire 21st century. Critics and audiences alike hailed it not only as the finest action film in decades, but as a genuine masterpiece of visual storytelling. A work that proved big-budget action cinema could be both intellectually rigorous and emotionally resonant without sacrificing any of its spectacular entertainment value. The film's monumental success lies in its extraordinary ability to function simultaneously as a relentless 2-hour chase sequence and as a deeply layered narrative exploring fundamental themes of survival, redemption, and hope. The narrative structure is deceptively simple, operating almost as a modern mythological chase that draws upon archetypal storytelling patterns while completely reinventing them for a contemporary audience. The opening scenes introduce us to the post-apocalyptic wasteland, a barren and hostile environment that serves as the perfect backdrop for this tale of desperation and courage. We meet Max Rockatansky, portrayed with intense physicality by Tom Hardy, a haunted loner who has been reduced to a feral state by his traumatic experiences and who is immediately captured by the War Boys, the fanatical cult-like army serving the tyrannical Immortan Joe, played with terrifying presence by Hugh Keays-Byrne. Max is transported to Joe's formidable fortress, known as the Citadel, where he is cruelly used as a blood bag to sustain a sick warboy named Nux, portrayed by Nicholas Hoult in a performance that would prove to be one of the film's most surprising and emotionally complex elements. We are introduced in parallel to Imperator Furiosa, portrayed by Charlize Theron in a career-defining performance that would become iconic. She is Joe's trusted lieutenant, a woman who has risen through the ranks of his brutal hierarchy through sheer force of will and extraordinary skill. When she pilots the massive war rig on what appears to be a routine fuel run, she secretly deviates from her assigned route, hiding within the vehicle Joe's 5 wives: Angharad, Capable, Toast, the Dag, and Chaido, women who have been kept as breeding stock by the tyrannical ruler. Furiosa is risking absolutely everything, her position, her life, and any hope of future survival, to lead these women to the green place, the idyllic land of her childhood that she remembers as a paradise of abundance and freedom in stark contrast to the desolate wasteland they now inhabit. When Immortan Joe discovers the escape, he mobilizes his entire military force, summoning his powerful allies, the Bullet Farmer and the People Eater, to join the relentless pursuit across the desert. The film's central extended chase begins with extraordinary intensity as Nux, with Max still strapped unwillingly to his vehicle as a living blood bag, joins the fray, leading to a series of spectacular crashes that demonstrate the film's commitment to practical effects and real stunt work. After a devastating and visually breathtaking sandstorm that completely rearranges the landscape and the circumstances of the chase, Max finds himself reluctantly but necessarily allied with Furiosa and the wives, forming an uneasy partnership born of mutual survival needs rather than any genuine trust or shared purpose. This alliance gradually transforms as the group fights its way across the seemingly endless desert, always hoping to find the green place that Furiosa has promised will be their salvation and new beginning. The group eventually discovers the Vuvolini, a clan of matriarchal warriors from whom Furiosa was taken as a child, only to learn from them that the green place is irrevocably gone, now existing only as the uninhabitable swamp they have just crossed in their journey. This moment of profound disappointment could have shattered the group's resolve, but instead it forces them to confront their situation with new clarity and determination. The survivors, now joined by the Vuvolini warriors, make the bold decision to ride across a vast salt flat in search of any possible new home, demonstrating that hope, once awakened, cannot be easily extinguished even by devastating revelations. Max intervenes crucially when he convinces them to turn back, arguing with practical intelligence that the Citadel, now left undefended in their absence, possesses exactly the resources they need for genuine survival: water, crops, and a defensible position that could become a new beginning rather than merely another desperate refuge. The climactic confrontation occurs when Joe's forces intercept the group in a final brutal battle that tests every character to their absolute limits. Furiosa is gravely wounded in the fighting, but with Max's determined assistance she manages to kill Immortan Joe, delivering the fatal blow that ends his tyrannical reign forever. Nux, having undergone a complete transformation from fanatical follower to selfless hero, sacrifices himself in a spectacular act that blocks the pursuing army and allows the others to escape. Max saves Furiosa's life through a blood transfusion, returning the gift that she indirectly gave him when he was used as a blood bag earlier in the narrative, a beautiful circular gesture that demonstrates how far both characters have evolved. The survivors return triumphantly to the Citadel, where they are hailed as liberators by a population that has endured years of oppression. In a final act of solitude that defines his character, Max disappears into the crowd, leaving Furiosa to lead the people toward a new and better future, acknowledging that his role in this story was to help others find their way rather than to seek a home for himself. The climactic confrontation occurs when Joe's forces intercept the group in a final brutal battle that tests every character to their absolute limits. Furiosa is gravely wounded in the fighting, but with Max's determined assistance she manages to kill Immortan Joe, delivering the fatal blow that ends his tyrannical reign forever. Nux, having undergone a complete transformation from fanatical follower to selfless hero, sacrifices himself in a spectacular act that blocks the pursuing army and allows the others to escape. Max saves Furiosa's life through a blood transfusion, returning the gift that she indirectly gave him when he was used as a blood bag earlier in the narrative, a beautiful circular gesture that demonstrates how far both characters have evolved. The survivors return triumphantly to the Citadel, where they are hailed as liberators by a population that has endured years of oppression. In a final act of solitude that defines his character, Max disappears into the crowd, leaving Furiosa to lead the people toward a new and better future, acknowledging that his role in this story was to help others find their way rather than to seek a home for himself. Examining Max Rockatansky as portrayed by Tom Hardy, this version of the character is a feral creature of pure survival instinct, haunted by persistent visions of those he failed to protect in his past. He speaks remarkably little throughout the entire film, yet his actions communicate volumes about his internal state and gradual transformation. He is a classic reluctant hero archetype, a man who has retreated from human connection and commitment, but who gradually rediscovers his humanity by choosing to fight for something larger than his own immediate survival. As numerous reviewers noted at the time of release, he effectively regains his humanity by sticking with someone who yearns for a better tomorrow, demonstrating that even the most damaged individuals can find redemption through connection with others who maintain hope in seemingly hopeless circumstances. Imperator Furiosa functions as the film's true protagonist, a revolutionary icon whose personal mission drives the entire narrative forward. Charlize Theron's extraordinary performance combines raw physical brutality with deep emotional sensitivity, creating a character who is simultaneously a warrior of unparalleled skill and a woman carrying the weight of profound personal trauma and hope. She is driven by a single overriding goal: redemption for her past abandonment of the Green Place and a return to her true family, the people and place she was forced to leave behind as a child. She represents a genuinely new kind of female hero in action cinema, one who is completely self-reliant, undeniably powerful, and emotionally complex without having her strength diminished by her vulnerability. She is not merely a warrior among warriors. She is quite literally the soul of the entire film, the character whose moral compass and emotional journey provide the foundation upon which everything else is built. The remarkable character arc of Nux, portrayed by Nicholas Hoult, represents the film's most surprising and emotionally complex figure. Initially introduced as a fanatical warboy eager to die for Immortan Joe in order to enter the promised glory of Valhalla, Nux's journey is fundamentally one of ideological awakening and personal transformation. His interaction with Capable, one of the wives who shows him genuine compassion rather than the contempt his society has taught him to expect, gradually humanizes him and opens his eyes to the lies he has been taught. Through her kindness and willingness to see beyond his fanaticism, he begins to question everything about his indoctrination and ultimately chooses to sacrifice himself for a genuinely noble cause, finding a more meaningful and authentic form of redemption than the false paradise Joe had promised his followers. Immortan Joe is a truly terrifying villain, a parasitic warlord who maintains power by controlling the most precious resources in his world: water, food, and human beings. He functions as a cult leader who uses carefully constructed mythology and perverted religious concepts to enslave his followers, particularly the war boys who willingly sacrifice their lives for his cause. Hugh Keays-Byrne, who previously played the main antagonist in the original 1979 Mad Max, brings decades of experience and understanding to this role, imbuing Joe with monstrous physicality enhanced by his elaborate costume and makeup, while also communicating a chilling sense of entitlement that makes his tyranny feel disturbingly authentic. Joe genuinely believes in his own right to possess and control others, making him not merely a villain of convenience, but a genuine monster whose worldview is completely consistent and terrifyingly coherent. The five wives are far from being passive damsels in distress waiting to be rescued. Each wife possesses a distinct personality that emerges clearly through the film's visual storytelling and limited dialogue. Angharad serves as the brave and compassionate leader of the group, willing to put herself in danger to protect others. Capable distinguishes herself as the empathetic one who reaches out to Nux and facilitates his transformation. Toast demonstrates practical intelligence and quick thinking in dangerous situations. The Dag brings eccentricity and boldness to the group dynamic. Cheeto initially appears fearful and uncertain, but grows into genuine courage as circumstances demand more from her. These women are active participants in their own liberation, making choices and taking risks rather than simply waiting for others to determine their fate. The fundamental thematic opposition between survival and genuine living runs throughout the entire narrative. Max initially represents mere survival, existing from moment to moment with no purpose beyond avoiding death and enduring whatever circumstances throw at him. Furiosa, by contrast, fights not merely to stay alive but to find a life worth living, a distinction that becomes increasingly important as the film progresses. This theme connects to the broader questions the film raises about what makes existence meaningful and whether mere continuation of life is sufficient when genuine hope has been abandoned. The characters who find redemption are precisely those who choose to pursue something beyond their own immediate survival, while those who remain trapped in purely survivalist thinking, including Max at the beginning, remain spiritually dead even while continuing to breathe. Redemption stands as perhaps the central theme connecting all the major characters. Max seeks redemption for his past failures, the people he could not protect and whose memories haunt his waking moments. Furiosa seeks redemption for leaving the green place as a child, for abandoning her true family and the home she now desperately hopes to find again. Nux seeks redemption for his entire life of misguided violence, for serving a tyrant and believing in lies that caused harm to others. The film suggests that redemption is found not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through selfless acts performed in connection with others, through choosing to help someone else even when doing so offers no personal advantage and may actually increase one's own danger. The sophisticated sound design contributes as much to the overall impact as the visuals do. The roar of engines, the clash of metal, the war cries of the various factions, and the haunting music all combine to create an immersive soundscape that places viewers directly in the middle of the action. The score by Junkie XL drives the film forward with relentless energy, while also providing moments of unexpected emotional depth, demonstrating that action films can have musical sophistication without sacrificing intensity. The film's approach to world-building conveys vast amounts of information about the post-apocalyptic society through visual details rather than explicit explanation. The hierarchy of the Citadel, the relationships between different factions, the resource economy, the religious beliefs of the war boys, all are communicated through what we see rather than what we are told. This approach respects the audience's intelligence while also creating a more immersive experience, as viewers must actively engage with the world to understand it rather than having everything explained to them. The film's treatment of masculinity presents multiple models of male behavior, while ultimately endorsing those that support rather than dominate others. Max's journey involves moving from isolated survival to cooperative action, from seeing others as threats or tools to seeing them as partners worthy of commitment. Nux's transformation involves rejecting the toxic masculinity promoted by Joe's cult in favor of genuine connection and self-sacrifice for others. The film critiques patriarchal structures, while also offering hope that men can change and find better ways of being in the world. The use of vehicles as extensions of character means each major vehicle reflects the personality and status of its driver. The war rig is massive, powerful, and practical, perfectly suited to Furiosa's no-nonsense approach to survival. Joe's vehicle is elaborate and imposing, decorated with symbols of his power and status. Nux's car starts as an extension of his fanaticism, but evolves as he does. This attention to vehicular design adds another layer of meaning to the action, as the vehicles themselves tell stories about their drivers. The treatment of hope in desperate circumstances shows characters maintaining hope even when evidence suggests that hope is irrational. The green place may be gone, but the characters continue searching for someplace where life can flourish. The wives refuse to accept their assigned role as breeding stock, even when escape seems impossible. The Vuvolini preserve seeds for decades, maintaining faith that someday those seeds will have earth to grow in. This persistence of hope in the face of overwhelming odds represents the film's most powerful message. Its assertion that human beings can maintain faith in possibility, even when everything around them suggests otherwise. The approach to violence depicts brutality without glamorizing it. The action is intense and frequent, but the consequences of violence are shown clearly, with injuries having lasting effects and deaths carrying emotional weight. Unlike many action films where violence becomes abstract through repetition, Fury Road ensures that every act of violence matters, that viewers feel the cost of each death and injury. This approach makes the action more meaningful while also serving the film's anti-war themes, as the cost of conflict is never hidden or minimized. The treatment of community and isolation sees characters moving from isolation toward community as the narrative progresses. Max begins completely isolated, captured and alone. Furiosa has isolated herself emotionally even while functioning within Joe's hierarchy. The wives have been physically isolated from the world. Through their shared struggle, all of these isolated individuals form a genuine community based on mutual commitment rather than mere convenience. This movement toward community represents the film's fundamental optimism. Its belief that human connection remains possible even in the most degraded circumstances. The use of religious and mythological imagery appropriates and transforms familiar symbols to serve thematic purposes. The War Boys' Valhalla is a perversion of actual religious hope, while the Green Place represents a more authentic form of paradise. Joe presents himself as a godlike figure, but his mortality is constantly emphasized, most dramatically in his death. This engagement with religious themes adds depth to the narrative, while also critiquing how religious ideas can be manipulated to serve oppressive purposes. The treatment of memory and trauma shows characters haunted by their pasts while also drawing strength from memory. Max's visions of those he failed to protect torment him, but also motivate his actions. Furiosa's memories of the Green Place drive her quest even when those memories prove unreliable. The Vuvolini preserve memories of the world before the collapse, maintaining cultural continuity across generations. The film presents memory as both burden and resource, something that can wound but also something that can guide and sustain. The approach to gender and power presents multiple forms of female power, while also showing how patriarchal systems attempt to contain and control women. Furiosa's power comes from her skill and determination, earned through years of struggle within a system designed to exclude her. The Vuvolini's power comes from their preservation of tradition and their willingness to fight for survival. The wives find power in solidarity and in their refusal to accept their assigned roles. This multiplicity of female power represents the film's feminist sophistication, its understanding that women's strength takes many forms. The treatment of sacrifice distinguishes how different characters understand and approach sacrifice differently. The War Boys sacrifice themselves for Joe's false promises, dying for nothing. Nux ultimately sacrifices himself for genuine causes, dying to protect others and enable their escape. Max offers his blood to save Furiosa, a sacrifice that costs him something but also connects him to others. The film distinguishes between meaningless sacrifice that serves oppression and meaningful sacrifice that serves life, arguing that the value of sacrifice depends entirely on what it serves. The use of landscape and environment means the physical setting functions almost as a character in its own right. The desert is vast and unforgiving, constantly threatening to overwhelm the characters. The salt flats represent the possibility of something beyond the known world, but also the danger of the unknown. The citadel towers above the wasteland, representing both human achievement and human oppression. This treatment of landscape adds depth to the narrative while also serving the film's environmental themes, as the wasteland is a constant reminder of what has been lost. The approach to character development through action reveals and transforms characters through what they do rather than what they say. Max's growth from isolated survivor to committed partner is shown entirely through his choices and actions. Furiosa's determination and vulnerability emerge through how she handles crises. Nux's transformation is demonstrated through his behavior at each stage of the narrative. This approach represents classical storytelling at its most effective, showing rather than telling, allowing audiences to observe character development rather than having it explained to them. The treatment of freedom and captivity shows characters existing in various states of unfreedom, even before considering physical imprisonment. Max is literally captive at the beginning, but he has also been psychologically captive to his trauma. The wives are physically imprisoned, but maintain psychological freedom through their refusal to accept Joe's definition of them. The War Boys are psychologically captive to Joe's mythology, even when physically free. The film presents genuine freedom as requiring both physical liberation and psychological liberation, freedom from external control and freedom from internal limitation. The use of pacing and rhythm means the relentless chase structure is punctuated by moments of relative calm that allow for character development and emotional resonance. The sandstorm provides a visual spectacle that also serves as a narrative turning point. The encounter with the Vuvolini offers a moment of reflection before the final confrontation. The quiet moments between characters, like Capable with Nux, provide emotional depth that makes the action meaningful. This careful pacing represents masterful control of the audience's experience, creating a rhythm that maintains engagement while allowing for necessary breathing room. The treatment of family and belonging shows characters forming new family bonds as their original families have been lost or destroyed. Furiosa seeks to return to her original family, the Vuvolini, but ultimately finds a new family in the group she has gathered. The wives become sisters through shared experience and mutual support. Max, who has lost his original family, finds something like family in his temporary connection to the group. The film presents family as something chosen and created rather than merely given, a bond formed through commitment rather than biology. The approach to storytelling and myth-making both uses and critiques mythological structures. Joe creates myths to control people, demonstrating how storytelling can serve oppression. The group creates their own story through their actions, demonstrating how narrative can also serve liberation. The film itself functions as a myth for contemporary audiences, a story about hope and resistance that resonates beyond its immediate context. This self-awareness about storytelling adds another layer of meaning to the narrative, making it not just a story, but a story about stories. The treatment of resources and their distribution shows how control of water, food, and fuel determines power relationships in the wasteland. Joe controls the water at the Citadel, using it to maintain power over his people. The chase for the war rig is fundamentally about controlling the resources it carries. The final resolution involves redistributing the Citadel's resources to the people. This focus on resources connects the film to contemporary concerns about inequality and environmental justice, making its themes relevant beyond the immediate narrative. The use of silence and minimal dialogue serves multiple purposes. It reflects the reality of survival in harsh conditions where talking can be dangerous. It emphasizes the visual storytelling by forcing viewers to attend to images rather than words. It makes the dialogue that does occur more meaningful, as each line carries weight that dialogue-heavy films cannot achieve. This approach represents confidence in the film's visual storytelling, trust that audiences will understand without excessive explanation. The treatment of aging and continuity, particularly through the presence of the Vuvolini, connects the present to the past and suggests possibilities for the future. These older women have preserved knowledge, skills, and hope across decades of survival in the wasteland. They represent continuity with the world before collapse, carrying forward what was valuable from that world. The seeds they preserve literally embody this continuity, the possibility of life persisting across generations. This focus on intergenerational connection adds depth to the narrative, while also serving the film's environmental themes. The approach to heroism distributes heroic actions across multiple characters, rather than concentrating them in a single protagonist. Max performs heroic actions, but so does Furiosa, so do the wives, so does Nux, so do the Vuvolini. Heroism emerges from the group, rather than being the property of any individual. This collective approach to heroism represents the film's deepest values. Its insistence that liberation requires many people working together rather than a single savior figure. The treatment of bodies and physicality conveys much meaning through physical presence and action. Hardy's performance as Max relies heavily on physicality, on how he holds his body and moves through space. Theron's Furiosa communicates volumes through her physical bearing, her readiness for violence, her moments of vulnerability. The war boys' sick bodies reflect the degradation of their society. This attention to physicality serves the film's commitment to visual storytelling while also emphasizing that in the wasteland, the body is the primary instrument of survival. The use of color grading and visual texture creates a distinctive look for each environment that contributes to the overall meaning. The orange desert suggests heat, danger, and the exhaustion of resources. The blue night suggests the possibility of coolness and rest, but also the danger of darkness. The green tinge of the swamp suggests failed hope, the green place that is no longer green. This careful attention to visual texture creates a coherent world, while also providing emotional information through color. The treatment of technology reflects the society that created it. Vehicles are patched together from salvaged parts, representing a world that can no longer manufacture new things, but must make do with what remains. Prosthetic limbs like Furiosa's arm and Max's leg brace represent both loss and adaptation, the human ability to continue functioning despite damage. The war rig itself is a masterpiece of improvisation, representing human ingenuity in desperate circumstances. This treatment of technology adds texture to the world, while also commenting on our relationship to the technological systems we depend on. The approach to sound and music means the score by Junkie XL drives the action, while also providing emotional depth. The use of drums and percussion reflects the primitive conditions of the wasteland, while also creating visceral excitement. The Doof Warrior's flame-throwing guitar represents the fusion of violence and spectacle that characterizes Joe's regime. The quieter moments in the score allow for emotional resonance that the action alone could not achieve. The film's sound design represents as much artistry as its visual elements, creating a complete sensory experience. The treatment of children and the future shapes the narrative's stakes significantly. The wives are valued as breeding stock because children represent the future, even in a dying world. The Vuvolini preserve seeds for children they hope will someday exist. The final shot of the film shows the people of the Citadel looking toward a future that includes children. This focus on children and futurity adds urgency to the action, while also connecting to the film's environmental themes, as the possibility of future generations depends on preserving a world they can inhabit. The use of framing and composition means each shot is carefully constructed to convey maximum information with maximum impact. The wide shots of vehicles racing across the desert establish scale and context. The close-ups during moments of emotional intensity draw viewers into characters' experiences. The action sequences are framed for clarity despite their complexity, allowing viewers to follow the chaos. This careful composition represents collaboration between director George Miller and cinematographer John Seale, resulting in some of the most striking images in contemporary cinema. The treatment of transformation and change shows characters fundamentally altered by their experiences. Max transforms from isolated survivor to committed partner. Furiosa transforms from driven fugitive to acknowledged leader. Nux transforms from fanatical follower to selfless hero. The wives transform from victims to agents of their own liberation. This emphasis on transformation reflects the film's fundamental optimism, its belief that people can change and grow even in the most difficult circumstances. The film's opening moments establish its visual language with extraordinary economy, showing Max standing beside his stolen interceptor, haunted by memories that manifest as ghostly visions of those he has failed, establishing immediately that this is a character defined by trauma and loss, while the pursuing war boys emerge from the dust. Like demons from some ancient mythology, their white-painted faces and excited cries creating an immediate sense of religious fanaticism that will prove central to understanding Immortan Joe's power structure. And the capture sequence demonstrates both Max's ferocious will to survive and the overwhelming force that Joe can bring to bear against any who oppose him, with the practical effects giving every crash and collision a visceral weight that computer-generated imagery rarely achieves. And as Max is dragged back to the Citadel, we see this fortress for the first time. A massive rock formation towering above the desert with water cascading down its face in a deliberate echo of images of paradise perverted into a tool of control. While below the masses press against gates they cannot open, their desperate hands reaching toward the water they need to survive but cannot reach, establishing the fundamental injustice that drives the film's political consciousness, and the Citadel itself becomes a character in this opening, its three levels representing the strict hierarchy Joe has imposed, with himself at the top controlling the water, the war boys in the middle serving as his military force, and the masses at the bottom existing in perpetual deprivation, while the pregnant wives we glimpse in silhouette against the sky represent another form of resource, their bodies as controlled and exploited as the water itself, and this opening section accomplishes in minutes what lesser films might take reels to establish, creating a complete world with its own rules, hierarchies, and mythology through images alone, demonstrating Miller's commitment to visual storytelling that would characterize the entire film. The introduction of Furiosa subverts expectations immediately, as the camera reveals her not through her appearance but through her actions, her mechanical arm operating the war rig's controls with practiced efficiency, while her eyes scan the horizon with purpose that suggests something beyond mere duty. And the audience learns she is an Imperator, Joe's most trusted commander, before we learn anything else about her, establishing her competence and status before her gender becomes relevant. And when she turns to reveal herself fully, the shaved head and grease-streaked face challenge conventional beauty standards while creating an image of formidable power, and her decision to deviate from the established route is shown through subtle shifts in expression rather than dialogue. Theron's performance communicating volumes through micro-expressions that reveal both determination and fear. And the moment when she opens the hidden compartment to reveal the wives transforms everything. The audience thought they understood about her character, revealing that her apparent loyalty to Joe was always a performance, a means to an end, and the wives themselves emerge from darkness into light like figures from a Renaissance painting, their white costumes contrasting with the dust and grime of the wasteland while also marking them as possessions, beautiful objects Joe has collected. But their eyes tell a different story, alert and intelligent, already calculating their chances, and the brief exchange between Furiosa and Angharad establishes their partnership without sentimentality. Two women who understand the risks they are taking and have chosen to take them anyway. And as the war rig rolls toward the gates, the audience understands that every guard, every checkpoint, every moment of potential discovery carries life or death consequences, creating tension that will sustain the next 2 hours. When Immortan Joe discovers the escape, his reaction reveals the full scope of his tyranny and the personal nature of this theft. For these are not merely subjects who have defied him, but possessions that have removed themselves from his control, an offense against his entire worldview. And his mobilization of the war machine demonstrates the resources at his command. With vehicles emerging from every level of the citadel like insects from a disturbed nest, each one uniquely modified for its specific purpose in the chase, and the introduction of his allies, the bullet farmer and the people eater, expands the world while also showing how Joe's power extends beyond his immediate fortress through alliances built on mutual dependence, and the bullet farmer's domain of ammunition and the people eater's control of fuel represent the other essential resources in this world, creating a complete economic system built on scarcity and violence, and the war cry that echoes across the wasteland. As the chase begins, remember me, carries multiple meanings, serving as both a promise of violence and a plea for immortality through the Valhalla myth that drives the war boys to such desperate acts, and Nux's excitement at joining the chase, his repeated cries of "witness me," establish the religious fervor that makes Joe's army so dangerous, young men eager to die for a promised glory that will never come. And the insertion of Max into this chase as a blood bag for Nux creates an immediate connection between our protagonist and his eventual antagonist, a relationship that will evolve in unexpected directions as the film progresses. The first chase sequence establishes the film's action philosophy through pure cinema, with editing that maintains spatial coherence even at tremendous speed, allowing the audience to track multiple vehicles and their relationships to one another while never losing sight of the central conflict and the poles that swing between vehicles, allowing war boys to board and attack. Create vertical movement that uses the full frame while adding to the chaos and the flame-throwing guitar of the doof. Warrior provides an absurdist commentary on the entire proceeding, the fusion of violence and entertainment made literal, and Max's attempts to free himself from Nux's car create running physical comedy amid the destruction. Hardy using his body to communicate frustration and desperation without words. And when Nux attempts his own glorious death by driving toward the war rig, only to have Max interfere with his steering, the film establishes its interest in the gap between mythological death and actual death, between the glorious sacrifice the war boys imagine and the messy reality of dying for nothing. And the crashes that follow demonstrate the commitment to practical effects, real vehicles flipping and destroying in ways that digital effects cannot replicate, each impact carrying physical weight that the audience feels viscerally. And the introduction of the sandstorm as a narrative element transforms the chase entirely, nature asserting its power over human conflicts and rearranging the playing field in ways none of the participants could have anticipated. The sandstorm sequence represents a high point of visual storytelling, with the storm itself becoming a character that intervenes in the chase, its winds howling with the voices of the dead according to Furiosa's later explanation. And the lightning that illuminates the chaos creates moments of stark beauty amid destruction, each flash revealing tableaus of vehicles tumbling through the air like toys in a child's tantrum. And Max's escape from Nux's car during the storm, his first moments of genuine freedom since the film began, are shot with subjective intensity that places the audience inside his experience of confusion and opportunity, and when he emerges from the storm to find himself alone with Furiosa and the wives, the film has completed its narrative reorganization, stripping away the massive chase to focus on this small group of survivors who must now decide whether to trust one another. And the moment of Max and Furiosa facing each other across the sand, weapons ready, establishes the fundamental tension that will drive their relationship. Two warriors who recognize each other's competence without yet trusting each other's intentions, and the wives observing this standoff add another layer of complexity, their fates depending on how these two damaged people resolve their mutual suspicion. And the storm's aftermath reveals the transformed landscape, vehicles buried in sand. The old chase ended, and a new one about to begin. Max's first extended interaction with the group reveals his character through action rather than words, as he immediately assesses resources, takes control of the war rig, and attempts to continue alone, demonstrating that his default mode is solitary survival even when group cooperation might offer better odds, and Furiosa's challenge to his assumption of command, her refusal to be sidelined in her own mission, establishes the equality that will define their eventual partnership, two leaders who must learn to share authority rather than one submitting to the other, and the wives' observation of this power struggle adds comic commentary, their exchanged glances communicating amusement at male posturing even in life-or-death circumstances. And when the pursuing forces reappear on the horizon, the argument becomes moot, survival requiring cooperation whether trust has been earned or not. And the film's refusal to resolve this tension easily, to have Max and Furiosa immediately become friends, honors the complexity of traumatized people learning to work together, and the subsequent chase sequences develop this dynamic through action, with Max and Furiosa developing unspoken coordination through necessity, each learning to anticipate the other's moves without verbal communication, and Nux's reappearance as a stowaway adds another element to this developing group dynamic, his presence initially seeming like a threat, but gradually revealing potential for something more. The journey across the salt flats introduces a visual palette shift that signals narrative transformation, the white expanse stretching to every horizon creating an entirely different emotional register from the orange desert that has dominated thus far, and the silence that accompanies this landscape, broken only by the war rig's engine, allows for character moments that action has prevented, with the wives tending one another's wounds and sharing brief exchanges that reveal their individual personalities and the bonds they have formed through shared suffering, and Furiosa's interactions with the group show her leadership style, which differs fundamentally from Joe's tyranny in its reliance on respect rather than fear, its willingness to explain rather than merely command, and Max's continued isolation even within the group, his refusal to engage emotionally despite his physical presence, demonstrates how deeply trauma has damaged his capacity for connection, and the Vuvolini's appearance, emerging from the landscape like figures from a dream, represents the first genuine surprise for both the characters and the audience, a possibility none had considered, and the reunion between Furiosa and the woman who knew her as a child carries emotional weight, because Theron's performance has established how much this hope has meant to her, how the green place has functioned as both goal and salvation throughout her desperate journey, and the revelation that the green place is gone, that the swamp they crossed was all that remains of Furiosa's paradise, lands with devastating force precisely because the film has allowed us to share her hope, to believe alongside her that redemption through return might be possible. The Vuvolini's revelation that the green place is gone transforms the narrative's purpose, removing the original goal and forcing the characters to confront what they truly want rather than what they thought they wanted, and the subsequent council scene, with the older women and the younger group sharing their perspectives, becomes a philosophical discussion about hope and survival, about whether continuing to exist counts as living when there is nothing to live for, and the seeds the Vuvolini have preserved, carefully stored across decades of survival in the wasteland, become a powerful symbol of hope maintained against all evidence, faith that someday there will be Earth capable of supporting growth again, and Furiosa's collapse against the Varik, her face showing devastation that her warrior's discipline cannot hide, reveals the cost of hope defeated, the danger of allowing oneself to believe, and the wives' refusal to accept despair, their insistence that they did not escape Joe's tyranny only to give up and die in the desert, shifts the dynamic, making them active participants in determining their fate rather than passengers on Furiosa's mission. And the decision to cross the salt flats towards something unknown represents a new kind of hope, one not based on memory of paradise but on possibility of future, on the chance that what lies ahead might be better than what lies behind. And Max's role in this discussion is characteristically silent, observing rather than participating, but his presence as witness matters. The group's process happening in front of him and gradually affecting his own calculations. Max's intervention, to suggest returning to the Citadel, represents his first genuine contribution to the group's strategic thinking, using his survivalist's assessment of resources to propose something none of the others had considered. And the logic of his argument is impeccable. The Citadel has water, has crops, has defensible position, and more importantly, is currently undefended with its entire army chasing them across the desert. And the moment when he says hope is a mistake, only to immediately contradict himself by offering hope through practical means, captures his character's complexity. The man who claims to believe in nothing acting to make something possible, and the group's acceptance of this plan, their willingness to trust a man who has given them no reason for trust, demonstrates how shared struggle creates bonds that exceed rational calculation, and the decision to turn back transforms the narrative structure from linear escape to circular return. The chase now moving back toward its origin with the roles reversed. Hunters becoming hunted, and Furiosa's reaction to this plan, her gradual emergence from despair into renewed purpose, shows Theron's ability to communicate emotional transformation through subtle shifts in physical bearing. The straightening of her spine, the return of focus to her eyes, and the Vuvolini's acceptance of this younger generation's leadership, their willingness to follow rather than lead, represents a passing of torch that carries symbolic weight beyond the immediate narrative. The final chase back toward the Citadel compresses all the film's themes into extended action that never loses sight of character, with each participant in the pursuing force representing different aspects of Joe's tyranny. The bullet farmer's blind rage, after losing his eyes, creating comedy that nonetheless serves thematic purpose, showing how violence diminishes rather than enhances those who practice it. And the people eater's obsession with fuel consumption, his equation of resources with worth, critiques the economic thinking that created the wasteland in the first place, and Joe's single-minded determination to recover his property, his inability to conceive of the wives as anything other than possessions, drives him toward his doom with tragic inevitability. And the sequence in the mud flats, where the war rig becomes stuck and the group must fight off attackers, allows each character moments of heroism that feel earned rather than automatic, the wives using weapons with increasing competence, the Vuvolini demonstrating skills preserved across generations, and Max and Furiosa fighting back-to-back in a visual representation of the trust they have developed and Nux's final transformation. His decision to drive the war rig into the pursuing army as a sacrifice completes his arc from fanatical follower to genuine hero, his death serving life rather than the false promise of Valhalla, and the moment when Capable realizes what he intends, her face showing grief, that honors his transformation, ensures his sacrifice carries emotional weight rather than functioning as mere plot mechanics. Furiosa's wounding during the final confrontation, the pole tearing through her side as she fights to reach Joe, creates the film's most intense emotional crisis, with Max's reaction revealing how much this partnership has come to mean to him despite his continued claims of emotional distance, and his improvised surgery, removing the pole and staunching the bleeding with whatever materials are available, demonstrates the practical skills that have kept him alive while also showing care that mere survival would not require. And the moment when he realizes she needs blood, that his role as blood bag has returned, but now as gift rather than theft, creates beautiful circularity in their relationship. The thing that began as exploitation transformed into salvation, and his decision to give his blood, to weaken himself to save another, represents the final stage of his rehumanization. The choice to risk his life for someone else's future, and Furiosa's killing of Joe, the final shot, fired from her mechanical arm, ends his tyranny with brutal finality, the mask that represented his power falling away to reveal the ordinary face beneath, and the subsequent image of Joe's body lying in the dust while his former subjects watch from the citadel above communicates revolutionary possibility through visual means. The fall of the tyrant opening space for something new, and Max's departure into the crowd, his refusal to claim credit or remain as leader, completes his character arc, while also making space for Furiosa's ascension, acknowledging that his role was to help others find their way, not to seek a home for himself. The final images of the film carry extraordinary thematic weight, with Furiosa lifted high on the platform that once displayed Joe's water, now used to elevate a liberator rather than a tyrant, and the crowd's reaction, their faces showing hope that has not existed in their world for years, communicates the possibility of political transformation through purely visual means, and the wives standing beside Furiosa, their white costumes now marked with the dust and blood of their journey, shows them as participants in their own liberation rather than passive recipients of rescue, and the Vuvolini among the crowd represent continuity with the past and possibility for the future, their seeds now having earth that might support growth, and Max's disappearance into the crowd, his face barely visible before he turns away, maintains his character's essential solitude while also suggesting that he has found a place, even if he cannot stay in it, and the final shot of the citadel against the sky, water flowing freely, carries hope that feels earned because the film has shown the cost of achieving it, and the absence of music in these final moments, the use of natural sound and silence, allows the images to resonate without manipulation, trusting the audience to feel what the characters feel, and the final dedication to the technicians and performers who made the film. The acknowledgement of the real people whose work created this fiction grounds the myth in human reality, reminding us that the hope the film offers is not merely fantasy, but something actual people can achieve through cooperation and commitment. The film's treatment of water as both literal resource and symbolic element operates on multiple levels throughout, with the opening shots of water cascading from the citadel establishing its value, while also showing how Joe uses it as tool of control, releasing just enough to keep his subjects dependent while never enough to make them independent. And the mothers who press their children forward to catch the spray represent the desperation of a world where water is not guaranteed, where survival depends on the whims of a tyrant, and the contrast between this controlled release and the final image of water flowing freely, accessible to all, provides visual shorthand for the political transformation the narrative has enacted, and Furiosa's memories of the green place, the green world of her childhood, associate water with life and possibility in ways that give emotional weight to the search. And the moment when the Vuvolini reveal that the green place is gone, that the swamp they crossed is all that remains, ties environmental destruction directly to the water scarcity that defines the present, suggesting that the world died because resources were mismanaged and ecosystems destroyed, and the seeds the Vuvolini have preserved carry hope for water's return, for rain that will make growth possible again, and Max's argument for returning to the citadel rests on water, on the practical reality that the fortress has what they need to survive, and the final images of the citadel with water flowing freely promise a future where water is shared rather than hoarded, where the resource that sustained tyranny becomes the foundation for liberation. The war boys' mythology of Valhalla receives sustained critique throughout the film, with their eager deaths for Joe's cause shown to be meaningless sacrifices that serve only to maintain his power, and Nux's initial faith in this mythology, his desperate desire to die gloriously and be witnessed, represents the tragic waste of young lives that tyranny requires, and the repeated cry of "witness me" carries pathos precisely because there is nothing genuine to witness, no actual glory in dying. For a lie, and the war boys' painted mouths, the silver spray they inhale before battle, suggests drug-induced fanaticism, faith maintained through chemical manipulation rather than genuine conviction, and Joe's promise of eternal life in Valhalla functions as classic cult leadership, offering rewards in an afterlife to justify sacrifice in this one. And the film's critique extends to the witnesses themselves, the other war boys who record deaths on camera, creating a simulacrum of meaning, where none exists, and Nux's gradual awakening to the falsity of this mythology occurs through his contact with Capable, her genuine compassion revealing the emptiness of Joe's promises by contrast, and his final sacrifice, dying to save others rather than to enter Valhalla, reclaims the idea of meaningful death from the perversion Joe has made of it, and the moment when he says "witness me" one final time, now with genuine purpose, transforms the phrase from empty ritual to authentic statement. And the film's refusal to show him entering any afterlife, to provide any supernatural confirmation of his sacrifice, honors the reality that meaning comes from earthly impact rather than heavenly reward. The wives' gradual transformation from victims to warriors receives careful attention throughout the chase, with each woman finding her own path to agency through the challenges they face, and Angharud's early leadership, her willingness to place herself between danger and the others, establishes a model of courage that the others will eventually emulate, and her death, falling beneath Joe's vehicle while trying to protect the group, carries tragic weight precisely because she was the bravest. Among them, and Capable's role as the empathetic one who reaches Nux demonstrates that courage takes many forms, that compassion can be as powerful as combat skill, and Toast's practical intelligence. Her quick thinking in dangerous situations saves the group multiple times through resourcefulness rather than violence, and the Dag's eccentric observations. Her ability to see humor and absurdity, even in desperate circumstances, maintains the group's morale through dark times and Cheeto's arc. From fearful youngest to courageous participant, her final refusal to return to Joe's protection, despite her fear, represents the triumph of chosen identity over assigned role. And the moment when the wives pick up weapons and fight alongside Furiosa, and the Vuvolini feels earned, because we have watched them earn the right through previous choices, and their final appearance at the Citadel, standing beside Furiosa as equals rather than behind her as protected, visually represents the transformation they have undergone, and the film's insistence that these women liberate themselves, that Furiosa enables but does not accomplish their freedom, honors feminist principles of agency and self-determination. The Vuvolini's introduction expands the film's world while also providing historical depth, revealing that the wasteland was not always empty, that communities of women survived and maintained culture across generations of collapse, and their leader's revelation that she knew Furiosa's mother, that she watched the child taken away, adds personal dimension to the political narrative and the Vuvolini's skills. Their ability to ride and fight and survive demonstrate that female power does not require male models, that women can be warriors without becoming men, and their preservation of seeds across decades represents a different kind of power, the power to maintain hope and possibility through dark times, and their willingness to join the younger women's mission, to fight alongside them despite age and weariness, shows solidarity across generations, the old supporting the young in ways that Joe's world never allowed, and the moment when they reveal that the green place is gone. That Furiosa's hope was founded on memory that no longer corresponds to reality, carries double weight because they share her grief, having lost the same home themselves, and their decision to cross the salt flats anyway, to seek new home rather than mourn old one, demonstrates the resilience that has kept them alive, and their final integration into the Citadel's population, the older women finding place among the younger, suggests that survival requires all generations working together, that hope for the future depends on preserving wisdom from the past. Max's visions of the girl who haunts him, appearing at moments of crisis throughout the film, provide insight into his internal state without requiring exposition. And these visions, the girl with the rag doll who seems to accuse him of failure, represent the trauma that has driven him to isolation, the people he could not protect who continue to demand acknowledgement, and the way these visions shift over the course of the narrative, from pure accusation to something more complex, tracks his gradual rehumanization. And the moment when he sees the girl during his blood transfusion to Furiosa, her expression now peaceful rather than accusing, suggests that his sacrifice has begun to answer the debt he carries, and the final vision of the girl, seen as he disappears into the crowd, her image now almost benevolent, implies that redemption through connection is possible, that past failures can be addressed through present choices, and the film's refusal to explain these visions, to provide backstory that would reduce their power, maintains their mysterious quality while allowing them to function symbolically, and Hardy's reactions to these visions, his physical responses to presences only he can see, communicate volumes about guilt and trauma without a word of dialogue, and the integration of these visions into action sequences, the way they appear at moments of maximum danger, suggests that his trauma is not separate from his survival, but central to it, the engine that drives him even as it damages him. And the gradual quieting of these visions as he connects with the group implies that human connection can heal wounds that isolation only deepens. The film's treatment of disability and physical difference deserves sustained attention for its matter-of-fact integration of characters with various physical conditions, with Furiosa's mechanical arm presented not as tragedy or limitation, but as simple fact, a tool that serves her purposes as effectively as any biological limb, and Max's leg brace, the support he requires after unspecified injury, receives similar treatment, presented as practical necessity rather than character-defining condition, and the war boys with their tumors and illnesses, their bodies marked by the environmental degradation of the wasteland, are shown as victims of their world rather than objects of pity, and Joe's breathing apparatus, the mask that covers his face and gives him his distinctive voice, represents both his physical vulnerability and his power, the way he transforms weakness into terror. and the various prosthetic limbs and medical modifications throughout the pursuing army are presented. Without comment, simply part of the world's visual texture, and this normalization of physical difference carries political implications, suggesting that in a just world, all bodies would be accommodated without judgment, and the film's refusal to make disability the subject of special attention, to treat it as remarkable or defining, represents a more progressive approach than many films achieve. And the moment when Furiosa uses her mechanical arm to kill Joe, the same arm that marks her as different becoming the instrument of liberation, suggests that what society marks as lack can become source of power, and the final image of the Citadel's population, which includes people of all ages and physical conditions, implies that genuine community accommodates difference rather than demanding conformity. The vehicles of the wasteland deserve analysis as characters in themselves, each one representing the personality and values of its driver through modifications that serve both practical and expressive purposes, and the war rig's massive size and practical modifications reflect Furiosa's no-nonsense approach to survival, every addition serving function rather than ornament, and Joe's personal vehicle, with its elaborate decorations and imposing presence, represents his need to project power. Through appearance, the tyrant's understanding that authority requires spectacle, and Nux's car, initially decorated with religious imagery reflecting his fanaticism, transforms as he does, the accumulation of damage and modification marking his journey, and the various pursuing vehicles, each unique in design and purpose, create a moving bestiary of wasteland creativity. The Doof Warrior's truck with its speakers and flame-throwing guitar representing the absurd extreme of this design. Philosophy, and the poles that allow war boys to swing between vehicles create vertical movement that transforms the chase from two-dimensional pursuit into three-dimensional combat, and the way vehicles are destroyed, the practical effects giving each crash unique character, means that no two deaths are alike, each vehicle's end as individual as its creation, and the final image of the pursuing army stopped, their vehicles wrecked or abandoned, represents the defeat not just of Joe's forces, but of the entire philosophy of violent acquisition they embodied, and the survivors' arrival at the Citadel in the war rig, their vehicle battered but intact, suggests that practical purpose outlasts ornamental excess, that function survives when fashion fails. The film's use of landscape as moral territory deserves examination, with each environment carrying ethical weight that affects how characters are judged, and the Citadel's vertical hierarchy, its 3 levels representing different degrees of access to resources, makes visible the injustice of Joe's rule, the way some live in abundance while others starve, and the desert surrounding it, vast and seemingly empty, represents the world Joe has created, a wasteland where nothing can grow because resources are hoarded rather than shared, and the salt flats, white and featureless, suggest the possibility of beginning again, a blank slate on which new stories can be written, and the swamp that was once the green place, now toxic and uninhabitable, serves as warning about environmental destruction, the permanent cost of treating the world as resource to be exploited, and the Vuvolini's hidden camp, tucked away in the rocks, represents the possibility of alternative communities, ways of living that reject the wasteland's violence, and the final return to the Citadel transforms its meaning. The same physical space now representing hope rather than oppression because the social relations governing it have changed, and the film's insistence that landscape carries meaning, that where things happen matters as much as what happens, represents sophisticated storytelling that trusts audiences to read visual information, and the journey through different environments tracks the characters' moral development, each landscape challenging them in specific ways that reveal who they are becoming. The sound design of the film creates an immersive experience that visual elements alone could not achieve, with the roar of engines providing constant texture that varies with each vehicle's unique mechanical voice, and the war cries of the various factions, their distinctive calls and responses, establish group identity through audio as effectively as costume does visually, and the Doof Warrior's music. Heavy metal played at ear-splitting volume from a moving truck represents the fusion of violence and entertainment that characterizes Joe's regime, war as spectator sport, and the moments of silence that punctuate the action, particularly after major deaths or during the salt flat crossing, gain power through contrast, the absence of sound communicating emotional weight that music might diminish, and the voices of the dead that Furiosa hears in the sandstorm, the howling winds that carry memory, suggest that the wasteland is haunted by those who died within it, that violence leaves traces that cannot be erased. And the score by Junkie XL, with its driving percussion and melodic elements, provides emotional guidance without manipulation, supporting the action while allowing images to carry primary meaning. And the use of diegetic sound that characters within the film would actually hear, creates authenticity that non-diegetic music might undermine. And the final sequence's reliance on natural sound, the crowd's cheers and the water's flow, grounds revolutionary hope in physical reality rather than abstract emotion. The film's treatment of time deserves attention, with the relentless forward movement of the chase creating temporal pressure that never lets up, each moment carrying weight because delay means death, and the flashbacks and visions that interrupt this forward motion, Max's glimpses of the past, represent the way trauma disrupts linear experience, the past intruding on present, whether the survivor wills it or not, and the moments of relative calm, the salt flat crossing and the Vuvolini encounter, create temporal expansion that allows reflection before the chase resumes, and the film's 2-hour runtime, almost exactly the duration of the chase within the narrative, creates identification between audience and characters, our experience of time matching theirs, and the circular structure, the movement from citadel back to citadel, suggests that escape from oppressive systems may require returning to transform them rather than fleeing forever, and the final shots, with their slower pace and extended duration, allow the audience to process what they have witnessed, to experience the relief that follows crisis, and the film's refusal to show what happens next, to provide epilogue explaining the future, trusts audiences to imagine possibilities rather than having them supplied, and this temporal openness, the story ending while time continues, honors the reality that liberation is process rather than event, that the work of building new society begins where the film ends. The political philosophy embedded in the film emerges through action rather than dialogue, with Joe's tyranny representing classic fascism in its control of resources, its creation of external enemies, its manipulation of youth through false mythology, and the war boy's fanaticism, representing the appeal of such systems to those who feel powerless, the promise of meaning through submission. And the wives' rebellion represents the inevitable resistance that tyranny generates, the human desire for freedom that no oppression can permanently suppress, and the Vuvolini's survival represents the persistence of alternative traditions, ways of living that fascism could not entirely destroy, and the final liberation of the citadel, achieved through collective action rather than individual heroism, suggests that revolution requires many people working together, that no single savior can accomplish what community can achieve, and the distribution of resources at the end, water flowing freely to all, represents the film's economic vision, a world where necessities are shared rather than hoarded, and Max's disappearance into the crowd, his refusal to claim leadership, represents anarchist humility, the understanding that liberation requires stepping back so others can step forward, and the film's optimism about collective action, its belief that people can govern themselves without tyrants, stands as political statement more powerful than any manifesto. The visual references to other films and art movements enrich the viewing experience without becoming distractingly obvious, with the Italian Western's use of landscape and lone heroes informing the film's visual language, and the silent cinema's reliance on visual storytelling providing model for Miller's approach to narrative, and the German expressionist use of shadow and distortion appearing in the citadel's interiors and Joe's masked face, and the action cinema of the 1980s, including Miller's own previous Mad Max films, providing foundation for the chase sequences while the film exceeds them in scale and complexity, and the Renaissance painting's treatment of the female form appearing in the wives' initial presentation, their white costumes and careful poses evoking religious art while the narrative subverts that tradition, and the comic book panel's dynamic framing influencing the action composition, each frame carrying information like a panel in a graphic novel, and the documentary tradition's attention to practical effects. The film's pride in real stunts visible in how they are shot connects Fury Road to cinema's earliest commitment to recording actual events and the science fiction tradition's world-building. Its creation of coherent alternative realities provides framework for the film's extensive design work. And the feminist film tradition's critique of patriarchal representation informs everything about how the wives in Furiosa are presented, and the synthesis of these influences into something entirely original, a film that feels both deeply rooted in cinematic history and completely new, represents Miller's achievement as director. The film's treatment of masculinity through Max and Nux offers contrasting models of male development, with Max representing traditional masculine isolation, the lone hero who needs no one and depends on nothing, gradually revealed as inadequate response to trauma rather than admirable independence, and Nux representing the toxic masculinity that fascism cultivates. Young men taught that violence proves worth and death brings glory, and the transformation both characters undergo involves learning from women, Max through partnership with Furiosa, Nux through compassion from Capable, and the film's suggestion that men need women's influence to become fully human. That masculinity isolated from feminine wisdom becomes destructive, carries feminist implications that some critics have noted. And the moment when Max gives blood to save Furiosa, his body literally entering hers, represents masculine nurture rather than masculine violence, a different model of male contribution. And Nux's final sacrifice, dying to enable others to live, reclaims sacrifice from fascist appropriation, showing that men can give their lives for life rather than death, and the film's refusal to punish either man for their pasts, to hold Max's failures or Nux's fanaticism against them permanently, suggests that redemption through change is possible, that men can become something other than what they were. And the final image of Max disappearing, rather than claiming credit, represents masculine humility, the understanding that not everything is about him, that other stories matter as much as his own. The choreography of action sequences deserves analysis for its clarity amid chaos, with each fight and chase composed to maintain spatial relationships, so the audience always knows where characters are relative to one another, and the use of wide shots during complex action. The willingness to show stunts in full frame rather than cutting to hide limitations demonstrates confidence in the practical work, and the editing rhythm, the way cuts accelerate during moments of maximum intensity and slow during aftermath, creates musical structure that action films rarely achieve, and the integration of character moments within action. The way Nux's transformation occurs during chase sequences proves that action and character need not be separate, that violence can reveal as much as dialogue, and the use of the war rig as central stage. The action radiating outward from this fixed point provides anchor that prevents spatial confusion. And the variety of action within the chase, each encounter introducing new threats and requiring new responses, prevents repetition while maintaining coherence, and the final confrontation's choreography, with multiple characters fighting simultaneously in ways that remain clear, represents the culmination of this approach, action that tells story through every movement. And the film's insistence on practical effects means that each blow carries weight, each crash has consequence, and the audience's physical response to this action, the visceral reaction that digital effects rarely produce, proves the value of Miller's approach. The role of the organic mechanic, the character who appears throughout to service vehicles and occasionally comment on events, provides comic relief while also serving thematic purpose, his practical knowledge contrasting with the war boy's religious fanaticism, and his repeated appearances, always surprised to find himself still alive, suggest the randomness of survival in a world where death is constant, and his relationship with his organic companions, the living things he tends alongside. Machines represents the fusion of natural and mechanical that characterizes the wasteland, and his final appearance, witnessing the liberation of the Citadel, suggests that practical people, those who know how things work, may survive ideological conflicts that destroy true believers, and his bemused commentary on events, his observations about the absurdity of what he witnesses, provides audience surrogate for the film's more extreme elements, and his survival through the final chase. His presence at the end suggests that the wasteland needs mechanics as much as warriors, that practical skills matter as much as heroic deeds, and his final image, standing among the liberated crowd, represents the ordinary people whose lives are changed by the film's events, the ones for whom revolution matters most, and his continued existence, his refusal to die dramatically, honors the reality that most people survive through luck and practicality rather than heroic action. The film's treatment of children, both the wives' potential children and the children of the Citadel visible in crowds, adds urgency to the political narrative, with the possibility of future generations providing stakes beyond individual survival, and the wives' refusal to be breeding stock, their assertion that their bodies belong to themselves, connects reproductive freedom to broader liberation, and the children of the Citadel, pressed forward to catch water spray, represent the innocent victims of Joe's tyranny, those who had no choice in the world they inherited, and Furiosa's mission, freeing the wives, is also about freeing future children from being born into slavery, and the Vuvolini's seeds, preserved for future generations, represent hope that children will have world worth inheriting. And the final shots of the citadel, with children visible among the crowd, suggest that future now possible. That children born after Joe's fall will know different world, and the film's refusal to show these children's fates, to guarantee happy ending, honors the uncertainty of real liberation, the work that remains after tyrants fall, and the emphasis on intergenerational responsibility. The duty of present to future provides ethical framework that individual survival could not sustain, and the final image of water flowing, children reaching for it without fear, suggests that this responsibility has been met, at least for now. The sound of engines throughout the film creates musical texture that operates independently of the score, with each vehicle possessing unique voice that allows audiences to identify them by sound alone, and the war rig's deep rumble, the sound of massive power under control, reflects Furiosa's character in audio form, and Joe's vehicle, with its higher pitch and mechanical complexity, suggests nervous energy that his calm exterior conceals, and Nux's car, initially enthusiastic and undisciplined, sounds different after his transformation, the engine reflecting his changed relationship to the chase, and the pursuing horde's collective roar. The combined sound of dozens of vehicles creates wall of noise that represents the overwhelming force of tyranny, and the moments when engines fall silent after deaths or during calm carry weight that constant noise could not achieve. And the use of engines sounds in emotional moments, the way a particular vehicle's approach signals hope or danger, integrates audio into narrative as effectively as visuals, and the final scene's natural sound, the crowd's voices replacing engine roar, suggests that human community can exist without constant mechanical violence, that peace sounds different from war, and the film's attention to audio detail, the care taken with every mechanical voice, demonstrates understanding that cinema is audiovisual art. That sound matters as much as image. The film's use of religious imagery extends beyond the War Boys' Valhalla to include visual references that enrich the narrative without becoming didactic, with Joe's mask suggesting both priest and executioner, the one who mediates between people and gods while also delivering death, and the wives' white costumes, their presentation as sacrificial virgins, invoking religious traditions of female purity that the film subverts, and the Vuvolini's role as wise women, preservers of tradition and seeds, suggesting feminine spiritual power. That contrasts with Joe's masculine cult, and the sandstorm as voice of the dead, the ancestors speaking through wind, representing religious experience that predates Joe's manipulation, and the final ascent to the citadel, the survivors raised on platform to the people's cheers, suggesting resurrection imagery that the film undercuts by keeping its characters alive, and Max's disappearance, his refusal to stay and be worshipped, rejecting the role of savior that lesser films would embrace, and the water's flow at the end, the life-giving resource released to all, suggesting baptismal imagery, new life through immersion. And the film's engagement with religious themes without endorsing any particular faith allows it to speak to universal human concerns about meaning and sacrifice, and the critique of manipulated religion, Joe's Valhalla as tool of control, stands alongside respect for genuine spiritual experience, the Vuvolini's reverence for ancestors and seeds. The costume design deserves analysis for its communication of character and status through visual means, with each faction wearing distinctive clothing that immediately identifies allegiance, while also revealing individual variation within groups, and the war boys' white skin, achieved through spray paint that also serves as drug delivery system, marks them as Joe's property while also suggesting death in life, living corpses serving dead cause, and the wives' white costumes, initially marking them as possessions, become increasingly damaged and dirty as they gain agency, their clothing reflecting their transformation, and Furiosa's practical gear, her leather and mechanical arm, communicates competence without ornament, function over display, and Joe's elaborate costume, his mask and armor, represents power as performance. The tyrants need to appear more than human, and the Vuvolini's practical clothing, their leather and cloth adapted for survival, reflects their philosophy of adaptation rather than display, and the bullet farmer's ammunition-studded appearance makes him walking advertisement for his domain, his body literalizing his economic function, and the people-eater's obesity, his body marked by excess consumption, critiques the greed that created the wasteland. And the Doof warrior's absurd costume, his elastic-faced mask and guitar, represents the fusion of violence and spectacle that characterizes Joe's regime, and the final scene's crowd, their clothing reflecting their origins while now mixing together, suggests new community forming from old divisions. The film's treatment of hope as both necessary and dangerous, as thing that can sustain but also destroy, receives nuanced exploration through the characters' varying relationships to possibility. With Furiosa's hope for the green place driving her across the desert, while also making her vulnerable to devastating disappointment, and the wives' hope for freedom, their refusal to accept Joe's definition of them, sustaining them through capture and chase, and Nux's hope for Valhalla, his desire for glorious death, representing hope manipulated toward destructive ends, and the Vuvolini's hope, preserved in seeds across decades, representing hope maintained without evidence, faith in possibility rather than probability, and Max's claimed hopelessness, his assertion that hope is mistake, masking his own persistent search for meaning through action rather than expectation. And the moment when the green place is revealed as lost, when Furiosa's hope collapses, demonstrating the danger of investing too much in specific outcome, and the group's decision to cross salt flats anyway, to seek new home rather than mourn old one, representing hope redirected rather than abandoned, and the final liberation of the Citadel, the achievement of something none had initially sought, suggesting that hope may be fulfilled in unexpected ways, and the film's conclusion, with water flowing and people free, affirming that hope can be justified, that sometimes things do get better, and the refusal to guarantee this future, to show it lasting, acknowledging that hope requires renewal, that each generation must choose it again. The editing rhythm of the film creates experience that few action films achieve, with cuts that accelerate and decelerate in response to emotional content rather than merely maintaining pace, and the use of long takes during key moments, the camera holding on faces or actions, allowing audiences to sit with emotional weight, and the cross-cutting between parallel actions, the simultaneous events in different locations, building tension through comparison, and the match cuts that connect. Disparate moments, the visual echoes that link Furiosa's childhood to her present, creating meaning through juxtaposition, and the rhythmic editing of action sequences. The way cuts follow musical structure, creating experience closer to dance than typical action choreography, and the moments of stillness within editing storm, the held images that interrupt rhythm, allowing audience to process before continuation, and the final sequence's measured pace, the longer takes and slower cuts, providing release after tension, and the editor Margaret Sixel's work, her understanding of when to cut and when to hold, creating emotional experience that action films rarely achieve, and Miller's direction of her work, his trust in her judgment, resulting in editing that serves story rather than spectacle, and the film's multiple viewings revealing new connections, new echoes that editing creates, demonstrating complexity that rewards attention. The film's treatment of violence against women, always present as threat rather than spectacle, represents ethical approach to difficult subject matter, with Joe's predation implied rather than shown, the wives' fear communicating what explicit imagery could not, and their liberation achieved through their own agency, their refusal to remain victims, providing model that avoids simplistic rescue narrative, and the film's insistence that women can be warriors, that Furiosa's violence serves liberation rather than oppression, offering alternative to victimhood as only female story, and the moments when wives fight, when they choose combat over submission, reclaiming violence from male monopoly, and the final confrontation with Joe, Furiosa delivering death blow, representing women's power to end male tyranny, and the film's refusal to show Joe's crimes in detail, to make female suffering spectacle, honoring victims by not exploiting their pain, and the focus on female solidarity. Women supporting women through crisis, providing positive alternative to male-dominated narratives, and the wives' relationships with one another, their bonds formed through shared experience, offering model of community that opposes Joe's isolation, and the film's feminist politics, its commitment to women's agency and solidarity, earning praise that extends beyond typical action film reception. The use of color throughout the film creates emotional geography that guides audience response without requiring conscious attention, with the orange desert's heat and danger established through saturation that communicates physical reality while also suggesting spiritual exhaustion, and the blue of night bringing relief that characters feel and audience shares, the color shift providing rest for eyes accustomed to orange, and the green of the swamp, the failed green place, carrying melancholy. That color alone communicates, the absence of life where life should be, and the white of salt flats suggesting possibility, blank slate awaiting inscription, and the black of the crow fisher's domain, the oily darkness representing death and danger, and the red of blood, appearing sparingly and always significant, each drop carrying weight that constant violence would diminish, and the final scenes return to orange, now transformed by context, the same color meaning something different. Because characters have changed and the color grading's consistency, the careful control of palette throughout, creating world that feels coherent despite its variety, and the collaboration between Miller and cinematographer John Seal, their shared vision of color's emotional power, resulting in imagery that communicates through hue as effectively as through composition. The film's treatment of time through editing and pacing creates experience of duration that matches emotional content, with the chase's relentless forward movement compressing hours into minutes while maintaining sense of continuous pressure, and the calm moments expanding through longer takes and slower cutting, allowing audience to breathe before tension resumes, and the flashbacks and visions interrupting linear time, creating temporal complexity that mirrors traumatic experience, and the journey's circular structure, return to origin, suggesting that time in Wasteland moves differently, that progress requires return rather than escape, and the final scene's temporal openness, the refusal to show future, honoring uncertainty that follows liberation, and the film's 2-hour runtime, exactly matching narrative duration, creating identification between audience and characters, our experience aligning with theirs, and the multiple viewings revealing new temporal layers, new connections across time, as familiarity allows perception of patterns invisible on first viewing, and the film's treatment of aging through the Vuvolini, their presence connecting past to present, suggesting that time's passage can preserve as well as destroy, and the seeds they carry, containing potential across decades, representing time's possibility rather than its limitation. The relationship between Max and Furiosa develops through action rather than dialogue, their growing trust communicated through physical coordination rather than verbal expression, and the moment when they first fight back-to-back, instinctively covering each other's blind spots, representing partnership earned through shared crisis, and Max's decision to give blood, to weaken himself for her survival, transcending transactional relationship to achieve genuine care, and Furiosa's acceptance of his help, her trust in his intention despite his history of isolation, representing reciprocal vulnerability, and the final separation, Max disappearing into crowd while she rises to leadership, acknowledging that their purposes differ, that partnership need not mean permanent attachment, and the film's refusal to romanticize their relationship, to suggest romantic resolution, honoring complexity of human connection, and the equality of their partnership, neither dominating the other, providing model of cooperation that opposes Joe's hierarchy, and the moments of silent understanding between them, the looks that communicate what words could not, demonstrating trust beyond language, and their final exchange, brief and practical, acknowledging what they have meant to each other without sentimentality that would diminish it, and the audience's investment in their relationship, our hope for connection that survives, reflecting our own human need for bonds that transcend utility. The film's treatment of death as both meaningful and meaningless, as sacrifice and waste, receives exploration through multiple character arcs, with the war boy's deaths for Joe representing meaningless sacrifice, lives given for nothing, and the Vuvolini who die in final chase representing meaningful sacrifice, lives given for others' future, and Angharad death, falling beneath wheels while protecting others, carrying weight that her courage earned, and Nux's final sacrifice, dying to enable escape, transforming his earlier desire for death into genuine heroism, and Joe's death, anticlimactic and ordinary, his mask falling away to reveal face like any other, representing death that strips tyrants of power they claimed, and Max's survival, his continued existence despite countless dangers, suggesting that some must live to carry memory forward, and the film's refusal to count deaths, to make body count spectacle, honoring each death's individuality and the moments of grief between. Characters, capable mourning Nux, wives mourning Angharad, providing emotional weight that action alone could not achieve, and the final scene's living community, the survivors honoring dead through continued existence, suggesting that meaningful death enables meaningful life. The political economy of the wasteland receives detailed attention through the film's treatment of resources and their distribution, with Joe's control of water at the Citadel representing classic monopoly capitalism, the hoarding of necessity to maintain power, and the bullet farmers' ammunition and people eaters' fuel representing complementary monopolies. The three forming cartel that controls everything needed for survival, and the war boys' compensation for service, the promise of Valhalla. Rather than material reward, representing ideological manipulation that maintains economic exploitation, and the wives' status as reproductive property, their bodies' resources to be controlled, extending economic analysis to gender relations, and the Vuvolini's alternative economy, their communal sharing and preservation for future, representing different economic possibility. And the final liberation's redistribution, water flowing to all who need it, representing economic justice achieved. Through political transformation, and the film's critique of resource hoarding, its connection between economic inequality and tyranny, providing political analysis that contemporary audiences recognize, and the seeds the Vuvolini preserve, representing investment in future that opposes Joe's extraction for present, and the film's economic vision, its hope for shared abundance rather than enforced scarcity, standing as political statement as powerful as its feminist themes. The film's use of the female gaze, the way it presents women for women's rather than men's viewing pleasure, represents significant departure from action film convention, with Furiosa's appearance serving character rather than spectacle, her shaved head and mechanical arm challenging conventional beauty, and the wives' presentation, initially resembling objectification, quickly subverted through their agency and complexity, and the camera's attention to female faces, to expressions and emotions. Rather than bodies, privileging interiority over appearance, and the relationships between women, the bonds and conflicts that drive narrative, centering female experience in ways action films rarely attempt, and the male characters' roles as supports to female narrative, Max enabling Furiosa's mission rather than vice versa, inverting conventional gender hierarchy, and the Vuvolini's presence, older women visible and valued, challenging cinema's erasure of aging female bodies, and the film's commercial success proving that female-centered action can reach wide audience, and the critical acclaim recognizing feminist achievement alongside technical excellence, and the influence on subsequent films, the increased attention to female agency in action cinema, demonstrating cultural impact beyond entertainment, and the film's place in feminist film history, its contribution to changing how women are represented, securing legacy beyond its immediate reception. The sound of the Doof warrior's guitar, the flame-throwing instrument that provides soundtrack to destruction, represents the film's willingness to embrace absurdity without losing emotional weight, and the character's appearance, his elastic mask and constant performance, providing comic relief that never undermines stakes, and the guitar's function as both weapon and instrument, fire and music serving same purpose, representing fusion of violence and entertainment that characterizes Joe's regime, and the character's survival through final chase, his continued presence at end, suggesting that spectacle survives even when tyranny falls, that entertainment outlasts politics, and the absurdity of his existence, the ridiculous premise of guitar that shoots fire, becoming iconic because played completely straight, the film's commitment to its vision making impossible believable, and the audience's response to this character, the delight he generates amid destruction, representing our own complicity in violence as entertainment, and the film's awareness of this complicity, its use of Doof warrior to comment on what we are watching, adding metacognitive layer to action, and the character's silence, his refusal to explain or justify, maintaining mystery that explanation would destroy, and his final image, standing amid wreckage still playing, suggesting that spectacle continues regardless of who wins, that entertainment is industry that serves any master. The film's treatment of environmental destruction as permanent, as loss that cannot be restored, adds gravity to hope that might otherwise seem naive. With the green place's transformation into swamp representing irreversible damage, the paradise that cannot be recovered, and the wasteland's extent, the desert covering everything, suggesting scale of destruction that individual action cannot reverse, and the seeds the Vuvolini preserve, their hope for future growth, representing possibility. Within limitation, the understanding that new life requires different conditions, and the Citadel's water, the resource that sustained tyranny, now available for all, representing redistribution rather than restoration, the recognition that justice means sharing what remains, and the film's refusal of easy environmental optimism, its insistence that some losses are permanent, giving weight to choices made now, and the connection between environmental destruction and social injustice, the same. Greed that ruined land creating tyrants, linking ecological and political analysis, and the final scene's hope, qualified and uncertain, representing realistic possibility rather than fantasy restoration, and the audience's awareness that our world faces similar challenges, the wasteland as possible future, adding urgency to entertainment and the film's environmental consciousness. It's understanding that how we treat world determines what world we leave, securing relevance beyond its immediate. Narrative. The role of the organic mechanic's companions, the living things he tends alongside machines, represents the persistence of life in world designed for death, and his relationship with these creatures, his care for them despite circumstances, providing model of nurture that opposes Joe's exploitation, and the creature's survival through final chase, their presence at liberation, suggesting that life continues despite everything, and the mechanic's practical knowledge, his understanding of how things work, including living things, representing wisdom that ideological fanaticism cannot provide, and his bemused commentary on events, his observations about absurdity, providing audience surrogate who maintains perspective amid chaos, and his final appearance among liberated crowd, his creatures with him, suggesting that ordinary life, the care for small things, matters as much as heroic action. And the film's attention to this minor character, the time spent establishing his presence, representing commitment to world building that extends beyond main narrative, and his function as comic relief, his appearances breaking tension while maintaining coherence, and the thematic resonance of his character, the fusion of organic and mechanical he represents, reflecting the wasteland's fundamental condition and his survival, his continued existence when many die, honoring the randomness that characterizes real disaster. The film's use of silence at key moments creates emotional space. That dialogue would fill inadequately, with the salt-flat crossings quiet, allowing characters to process their situation without verbalization, and the moments after major deaths, the absence of sound honoring grief that words cannot express, and the final scene's natural sound, the crowd's murmur and water's flow, providing conclusion that music would sentimentalize, and the sandstorm's howl, the voices of dead within wind, using silence's opposite to similar effect, absence within presence. And the moments between characters when words fail, the looks that communicate more than speech, trusting audience to read emotion without explanation, and the film's confidence in visual storytelling, its willingness to let images carry meaning, demonstrated through these silences, and the contrast between constant engine noise during chase and subsequent quiet, the relief that silence brings, providing emotional rhythm that sound alone creates, and the audience's experience of these silences, our own thoughts filling space that music might otherwise occupy, engaging us actively in meaning-making, and the film's understanding that silence can communicate as powerfully as sound, that sometimes nothing says everything. The character of the people-eater deserves analysis as representation of capitalist excess, his obesity literalizing consumption that defines his economic philosophy, and his obsession with fuel, his constant calculation of resources, reducing all value to measurable quantity, and his alliance with Joe, the partnership between tyrant and capitalist, representing fusion of political and economic power that maintains oppression, and his death in final chase, his vehicle destroyed with him inside, representing destruction of economic system that supported tyranny, and the film's critique of his values, his reduction of human life to resource calculation, extending to contemporary capitalism's similar reductions, and his appearance, his physical excess contrasting with wasteland's scarcity, representing inequality that his economics produces, and his relationship with Joe, subordinate despite his wealth, suggesting that capitalists serve tyrants rather than controlling them, and the moment of his death, unremarked and unmourned, representing system's indifference to individuals who serve it, and the film's economic analysis, its understanding that resource control enables tyranny, providing political depth that action films rarely achieve, and his function as villain among villains, representing particular evil within general evil, adding complexity to antagonist forces. The film's treatment of bodily autonomy, the right to control one's own body, connects multiple character arcs through shared theme, with the wife's refusal to be breeding stock representing fundamental assertion of bodily self-ownership, and Max's use as blood bag, his body treated as resource for others, representing violation that parallels their experience, and Furiosa's mechanical arm, her body modified by circumstance but under her control, representing adaptation rather than violation, and Nux's transformation, his body initially weapon for Joe, finally instrument of his own choice, representing reclaiming physical agency, and Joe's control of others' bodies, his assumption that they belong to him, representing patriarchal entitlement that film critiques, and the Vuvolini's aged bodies, their physical decline accepted rather than hidden, representing acceptance of bodily reality, and the final scene's bodies, free to move and choose, representing liberation's physical dimension, and the film's insistence that bodily autonomy matters, that control of one's own body is fundamental freedom, connecting to contemporary political debates about reproductive rights and medical choice, and the audience's recognition of this theme, our understanding that what happens to bodies matters, adding urgency to narrative stakes, and the film's refusal to treat bodies as spectacle, to exploit what it shows, honoring autonomy through visual ethics. The use of the war rig as central space, the vehicle that contains and protects the group throughout chase, creates mobile home that represents possibility of community in motion, and its modifications, the practical additions that enable survival, reflecting the group's adaptive philosophy, and its destruction during final confrontation, the rig finally failing after sustaining them so long, representing end of journey, the moment when movement must stop, and its original purpose, the fuel. Transport that served Joe's economy, transformed into vehicle of liberation, representing repurposing of oppressive systems, and the group's relationship to the rig, their dependence on its protection and their care for its maintenance, reflecting their interdependence and the rig's character, its distinctive appearance and sound, making it feel like living presence rather than mere machine, and its final image, wrecked but having served its purpose, representing cost of liberation, the things used up in struggle, and the audience's attachment to this vehicle, our investment in its survival, reflecting our investment in those it carries, and the rig's symbolic function, the mobile home as possibility of community without fixed location, representing hope that transcends place, and its replacement at film's end by Citadel, the fixed home replacing mobile one, representing arrival after journey, the achievement of destination. The film's treatment of vision and sight, of who sees what and how seeing affects power, runs throughout as thematic undercurrent, with Joe's mask covering his face while allowing him to see, representing hidden power that observes without being observed, and the war boys' desire to be witnessed, their need for their deaths to be seen, representing power of observation to validate existence, and the bullet farmer's blinding, his loss of sight transforming him from competent threat to raging danger, representing dependence of power on vision, and the Vuvolini's watchfulness, their constant observation of surroundings, representing survival through attention, and Max's visions, his sight of what is not there, representing trauma's power to override reality, and the final scene's visibility, the liberated crowd seen by all, representing transparency that opposes Joe's hidden power, and the film's own visibility, its commitment to showing rather than telling, representing trust in audience's sight, and the camera's gaze, the way it looks at characters, determining what we see and how we see it, representing film's power to shape perception, and the audience's role as witness, our observation of events giving them weight, implicating us in what we see, and the film's awareness of this dynamic, its use of witness theme to comment on our own watching, adding metacognitive layer to visual experience. The character of the bullet farmer represents military-industrial power, his domain of ammunition making violence possible, and his alliance with Joe, the partnership between political and military power, representing classic fascist coalition, and his appearance, his ammunition-studded clothing and weapons, making him walking advertisement for his product, and his blinding during chase, his loss of sight transforming him from calculating leader to enraged brute, representing military power, without political direction becoming mere violence, and his death unremarked and distant, happening off-screen while Furiosa deals with other threats, representing military's expendability once its function served, and his function in narrative, providing threat that forces group to adapt, creating opportunity for character development through crisis, and the film's critique of military power, its dependence on violence for violence's sake, extending to contemporary militarism, and his relationship to technology, his reliance on weapons that exceed his control, representing danger of creating what one cannot manage, and his final image, blind and raging, firing wildly at nothing, representing violence without purpose or target, and the thematic resonance of his character, the military industrialist as villain, adding political depth to antagonist forces.